Hey, you guys, it's Professor Vitt. It is Friday morning, just before 11 o'clock here in Rancho Cucamonga. It is a beautiful day outside. It's not even 50 degrees. It's clear. The skies are blue. There are some beautiful little fluffy white clouds out there. I'm sure it's beautiful where you are too, so I hope if you have a chance this weekend or today to enjoy that beautiful day, go out there and check it out. As promised, I told you guys I would release a video that would help to clarify some of the confusion on the mock exam. I want to apologize again if I did anything to contribute to your confusion, but hopefully this video will help clear stuff up. So, couple of things. If you're already comfortable with validity and soundness and you're just tuning into this video to see what the changes are, I'm just going to tell you right ahead, changes that I've made to this document are highlighted. So this is the cleaned up document. I changed a couple of things to make the obvious answer more obvious for you. So I'll release this as a PDF and it'll be called Exam 1 Modern Philosophy Fixed Typos version, right? I'll release it as a PDF with the highlights. I actually think I figured out what happened with regard to this exam, why it was such a nightmare. I actually had two versions of this document, and for some reason I didn't print up the right one. I'd like to think that would fix everything, but I was using an old version of the document. I'm not sure why I didn't pick up on that. So let's get to the start. So if you're here just checking in, just to check in, I think you'll be okay. I'm not going to run through the exam again, but you might want to look at some of the corrected options that I give just to make sure that you're sure which is which. Okay, so that's the first thing. So now the second thing is if you were one of the people, and I think a lot of folks felt this way, that you wanted that flow chart. Remember, we were talking about validity and soundness in class, and this is a way to evaluate whether a certain kind of reasoning is good or bad. So this is a kind of reasoning called deductive reasoning. We're going to look at this over and over and over again throughout the course, so it's a good time to take a peek. And what I'm going to do is walk you through the flow chart with each one of the problems that we have from the mock exam. So let's go through the flow chart first. And I'll also post this. It says valid invalid flowchart. I'll post it right below the corrected mock exam. So, all right. So first things first. Remember, I'm going to ask you to evaluate certain kinds of deductive arguments, and the phrase that you need to remember, the word that you need to remember, is versus. Right? V-S. I'm writing it backwards as I'm talking to you. V and then an S, and that's because first you'll evaluate validity, and then you will talk about soundness. So it's VS, just to remember the order. But here is very roughly how this will look. Let me see if I can make this look a little bit prettier for just a second. Zoom in just a tick more to our very first question. Okay, so I want you to start at the start of this flow chart right here at the very top. And the thing to remember is these two questions are actually really very similar. They're almost the same. So I want you to go with whichever one of these questions makes the most sense to you. Here it is. If the premises are true, is it possible for the conclusion to be false? So that's what you're asking, right? When you're asking about the premises, you're asking about the reasons for the conclusion, right? The supporting reasons for our conclusion. And so when we ask this question, we're saying, does the truth of the premises flow down to the truth of the conclusion? Or if those premises are true, is it necessary then that the conclusion is also true? So there's going to be two options here. You can answer yes or no. If the answer to that question is no, the argument is invalid and you are all done. If the answer is yes, then the argument is valid and you have to do one more step. So just real quickly, you ask yourself, if the premises are true, does that truth flow down to the conclusion? Do the premises force the conclusion to be true? If the answer to that question is yes, then the argument is called valid and you have to ask another question. If the answer to that question is no, then the argument is invalid and you're all done. It won't be sound because an argument that is invalid cannot be sound. All right, so now we're down to the argument being valid. The next question we ask is, are these premises actually true in the real world? Are these premises really, really the case? If the answer to that question is yes, then the argument's sound. If the answer to that question is no, then the argument is not sound. Okay, so we've done that. Let's zoom through here. Let me move this up to the top. And let's take a peek at our number 14 here. Okay, so this is going to be the problem that we look at. It reads, number 1. So 1 and 2 are premises. That is, they give support to our conclusion. And we're going to try and figure out what degree of support they give, right? So number 1, the first premise is all dogs are mammals. Number 2, the second premise is all German Shepherds are dogs. The conclusion is, therefore, all German Shepherds are mammals. Now, this is our problem. Let's figure out what we've got to answer. The first question, these are the same question, they're just arranged differently, right? If the premises 1 and 2 are true, is it possible for the conclusion to be false? Well, let's think about it. If it's true that all dogs are mammals, and it's true that all German Shepherds are dogs, then it would absolutely have to be the case that all German Shepherds are mammals, right? Because you're saying all dogs are mammals, all German Shepherds are dogs. Well, then just by virtue of how the first two sentences are articulated in terms of inclusion, it would just have to be the case that all German Shepherds are mammals, right? So the answer to that one is yes. So we know that for problem 14, this argument is valid, right? Now keep in mind, this is a reference to the mock exam problem. The numbers of the questions on the final exam will be different. All right, so problem number 14. All dogs are mammals. All German Shepherds are dogs. Therefore, all German Shepherds are mammals. That argument's valid. Let's move on to our next question. The next question is, are the premises actually true? Well, is it actually true that all dogs are mammals? Yes, it's actually true that all dogs are mammals. Now, we're not taking a course in biology, but hopefully that makes sense to you guys that all dogs are mammals. If not, know that that's true for the exam, right? Okay. Then our second question is, our second premise is all German Shepherds are dogs. So is that actually true? Well, yes. I mean, all German Shepherds are actually dogs. And I talked in class about, you might say Peter the Hermit was a German Shepherd or something from the First Crusade. Okay, but I'm talking about the pups, right? The woo-woo-woo, ah-woo-woo, those German Shepherds, not some actual other, German preacher from long ago. So is it actually true that all German Shepherds are dogs? Sure it is. And then what's the conclusion as a result? All German Shepherds are mammals. So notice that whenever we're evaluating soundness, I'm only asking whether the premises are actually true. And so 1 and 2 are actually true. The answer is yes. So this argument is sound. So number 14, this argument is valid because 1 and 2 force 3 to be true, and it's sound because 1 and 2 are actually true, right? So that's problem 14. Okay, now let's zoom up to number 15. We'll move it on up here. Almost there. Okay, let me move 14 out of the way. Get you out. By 4. Oh, what are you doing? Look at this. You know what it is? They're just not very pleasant to work with. Some text boxes are asking for trouble, okay? All right, here we go. So remember, we're going to start with a simple question. If the premises are true, is it possible for the conclusion to be false? Or if the premises are true, is it necessary that the conclusion is also true? Or do the premises do they force the conclusion to be true? Now, number 1. If flying saucers are real, then aliens are visiting Earth. Okay. Number 2, flying saucers are not real, thus aliens are not visiting Earth. Now, I know this is a tough question, but maybe here's a way to think about it. When I'm asking about validity, I'm asking if 1 and 2 are true, is 3 also true? And a way to figure out validity is to try to come up with an example where 1 and 2 are true, but 3 is false, right? And or in other words, more properly, where your premises are true and your conclusion is false. Now, all arguments are not going to be 2 premises, but they'll virtually always have 1 conclusion. And so let's just go ahead and start here with, if flying saucers are real, then aliens are visiting Earth. Flying saucers are not real, thus aliens are not visiting Earth. Can I imagine a world where it's actually true that if flying saucers were real, then aliens would be visiting Earth? Okay, so suppose that. Okay, imagine that world. And Suppose that it's actually the case that flying saucers aren't real, but it's true that aliens it's false that aliens are not visiting Earth, meaning they are visiting. What would that look like? Imagine a world where there are aliens, by aliens I mean extraterrestrials, and these extraterrestrials don't come here in flying saucers. They have never come here in flying saucers, and they never will come here in flying saucers. In fact, flying saucers are just totally fake. Suppose they're totally fake and they're just two plates slammed together. Instead, the aliens come here in cigar-shaped crafts. Now, in such a case where aliens are real and they're coming here in cigar-shaped craft, it would be true that if flying saucers were real, then aliens would be visiting Earth. And it's true that flying saucers aren't real, but then it turns out that it's false, that aliens are not visiting Earth because they're visiting Earth in a cigar-shaped craft. Okay, so that's number 15. Now, this helps us determine that if the premises are true, it's not necessarily the case that the conclusion is true. In other words, 1 and 2 could be correct, but 3 could still be false because the aliens are visiting Earth in cigar-shaped craft. In such a case, this argument would be invalid, and I have nothing else to do, right? I don't have to ask about soundness because soundness will only apply to arguments that are valid. Okay, so that is number 15. It's an invalid argument, and because it's invalid, we don't need to worry about whether or not it is sound. Okay, let's get number 15 out of here. And let's pull up number 17. Let's see here. Oh, come on. This is absurd. Come on, Professor Vitt. Let's make this happen here. All right. Let me move this baby to the front. Okay, actually that looks great. Okay, problem number 17. This is in the mock exam. Remember, I'm not going through the options, but if you look at the options on the updated exam, you'll see that I've cleaned them up so it's a little more obvious which is the best answer. Okay, problem number 17. Remember, the first question we're going to ask is about the premises. If they were true, what happens to the conclusion? So, number 1. Only mammals have lungs. Number 2, an iguana has lungs. Number 3, thus an iguana is a mammal. Now, the first question you ask is, if those premises are true, if it's true that only mammals have lungs, and it's true that an iguana has lungs, must it be the case that an iguana is a mammal? And the answer there is yes, right? Now, your brain's going, no, because, right, 1 doesn't seem to be correct, so it's not valid. No. I'm not asking, is the first premise correct? We're talking about validity, and validity asks, if those premises are true, assume they're true, if you like. What does that then mean for the conclusion? So validity asks, if the premises are true, would the conclusion have to be true? And that's correct here, right? If the premises are true, it's necessarily going to be the case that an iguana is a mammal. It's not that way in real life, but that's the way it is in the problem, right? If only mammals have lungs and an iguana has lungs, then an iguana is a mammal because only mammals have lungs. So the answer to our first question is yes. That tells us that this argument is, everybody working at home, valid. So we're going to move down here to a subsequent question. Are the premises actually true? And this is probably where, for many of you, your brain was already responding and thinking and jumping out and giving you the right answers, or giving you this answer. Is it actually true that only mammals have lungs? No. Other kinds of animals have lungs. And so reptiles have lungs, for instance. And so it's not actually true that only mammals have lungs for premise number 1. And so we know the answer to this question is no, and so we know the argument is not sound, right? So we know it's valid. Are the premises actually true? No, they're not, so the argument is not sound. All right, now, it is my dear hope that this was useful to you guys. I'm going to post this flowchart for you guys, and you might want to try to condense it to a smaller amount. And I've had students who've done things, I mean, not with this flowchart because I just did it, but I've had students who will memorize it and then they can reproduce the chart, right? They can reproduce the flow chart and then get the answers right that way. If that works for you, great. Remember, there are only going to be a few questions about validity on this exam, and we're going to continue to work with these concepts as we move through the course. Having taught thousands of people these concepts, I can tell you it takes a while to kind of get used to them. And if you've been away from them for a while, it'll take a while to kind of catch up to them, right? And so that's okay too. We're going to move through this together. If it's not 100% now, that's fine. That's okay. Remember, learning is going to be effortful. What that means is the harder you work, the longer what you've learned will stick with you, and the more deeply it will penetrate and become part of your mind and your intellect. And I'm going to contend, and this is, I really think this is true, the more that you have of logic, the better, right? Logic is not intuitive for our brains at all, but it is absolutely beneficial. And I pledge and warrant to every single one of you guys that you will be better off for spending the time with these concepts and taking this class. Absolutely. So it's a big weekend. If any of you guys are studying, please email me or message me. Probably the best way is on Canvas, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. If you just want to tweet me a quick question, that's fine too. I'm okay with that. And I'll be checking my email and my Twitter throughout the weekend, and hopefully that'll be enough. On Wednesday, your grades probably won't be done yet, but we'll start continental rationalism, and then we're going to chat about Aristotle and substance, because so much of what's going to come later is going to depend on having some understanding of Aristotelian substance. So thank you guys so much for watching this video and putting forth the effort in my class, and I promise you guys I will return that effort and you will double your investment. Okay, I hope you guys have a great weekend. Email me if you have any questions at all. Go Vikings!